time now. It's awkward to acknowledge people when they're not in the room, but I think it's still important. Right, we go to item 8, which is our Auckland Plan 2050 Annual Monitoring Report. We've got Karin and Denise. I was looking up expecting Jacques, and you were definitely not Jacques, Denise, so sorry.
Ko Karen Kirk tōka ingoa, and I'm here with Denise O'Shaughnessy, my manager, and the rest of the team from our Strategic Advice Unit. They all had input into the report. This is our Auckland Plan 2050 Annual Monitoring Report. Obviously we report on this quite regularly, and basically the report is to be formally received because we normally make this report public and we post it up on our website. We have a very short presentation, basically to provide some context for the Auckland Plan and how it relates to the work that you're currently doing on the long-term plan. So basically the Auckland Plan 2050 was the Auckland Plan was adopted in June 2018, and we've had quite extensive engagement with Aucklanders across the region. This plan sets our long-term strategic direction for Auckland, and the plan was reviewed in 2022 to reflect new data and incorporate new strategic direction set by the Council since 2018, particularly around climate. Now, the annual monitoring report uses 33 measures to assess general progress and identifying key trends across the Auckland Plan's 6 outcomes. So they're very high level outcome measures. Now, the Auckland Plan, next slide please. Oh, sorry. The Auckland Plan 2050 is a plan for all Aucklanders. So many of the actions required are not within Council's control, but are the responsibility of others, particularly government and also other NGOs and community organisations. Since then, Mayor and councillors have provided more detailed political direction to the Council group on strategic priorities to inform this year's long-term plan. And the political direction clearly articulates Council's vision for Auckland, but it also clarifies what Council's role is in delivering on that vision. And we brought our 3-yearly report to the committee in March, and that described in more detail progress on the overall outcomes for Auckland, and that's in the matrix there on the left. Basically, we identified a number of areas or opportunities for greater progress, and we then distilled these down into 4 strategic priorities listed there on the right. And I think these are well aligned with the LTP guidance from the Mayor and councillors. One of these was urban greening. This incorporates the work of the Open Space, Sports and Recreation Joint Political Working Group on the refresh of the Open Space, Sport and Recreation policy. Also considering green spaces as part of our response to create a more climate resilient city, and also considering the role of other actors and entities, particularly developers, and using our regulatory powers more effectively. In terms of thriving and resilient communities, this aligns with the vision for a beautiful, thriving and safe place to live, and it includes new approaches to the provision of public services and amenities, including work on alternative sustainable funding models. It also includes work to address our core challenge of targeting investment to our communities of greatest need. In terms of resilient infrastructure, we're doing a lot of work in that area, including the work on flood recovery and resilience, work around climate mitigation and adaptation, and on sustainable transport, it's all about making better managing the transport network, making the most of our existing assets and maximising the benefit of any new spend. So this would incorporate the work around, for example, the Auckland Integrated Transport Plan and reducing emissions from transport safety, from transport and improved road safety. So we're taking the report as read, so open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any questions? Councillor Filipaina, and member Ashmore.
Malo ladies, Tongan Language Week, and thank you, Chair. I see in number 6 in the report, it's got the Auckland Plan 2050 was created as a living plan and is able to reflect emerging or changing issues, provide updated data and evidence. When was the last time that, because you've said it's a whole of Auckland plan, when were the whole of Auckland consulted on the objectives, and have they been consulted on the objectives since 2018 when the plan was adopted?
Through the Chair, thanks for the question, Councillor Filipaina. So 2018 was the last time we did a major consultation in terms of the broader outcomes of the Auckland Plan. Obviously with the future development strategy, which is a key part of the Auckland Plan, there's been consultation on that. So the update we did in 2022 was more about updating for new information and new strategic direction and making sure that was all incorporated. With the resource management reforms and the requirement for a new regional spatial strategy, we'll need to consider the future of the Auckland Plan alongside that. So that's something that we're actually working on at the moment and thinking about what the options are.
Chair, supplementary. Do you think that the whole of Auckland should be consulted in regards to the plan?
Through the Chair, the resource management reform, so the regional spatial strategy will actually require consultation, so I think there will be opportunities to do that. We just need to think about, because there are different requirements from what we currently have in the legislation, we just need to think about how that works, but there will definitely be platforms for engaging with Aucklanders on those broader outcomes in the future.
Chair, there might be a question either to yourself or to Megan. In 2012, when the first Auckland Plan was done, we indicated that it should be looked at every 6 years. 2018 came along. There was no indication in the 2018 plan that we should have a look at it. Based on the changes that have happened, including COVID, and as a result, the impact it has on the whole of Auckland, are there any plans to end up looking at and consulting with the whole of Auckland on the whole of Auckland plan in 2024? And I mean, I'll save my comments to why I've asked that part. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Very good question, and I have asked for advice on this because of the bills that have been approved, 2 weeks ago through Parliament. We are the only and the first to do a full spatial strategy, the Auckland Plan, but because of the changes to the law, we will have to move now to this new system, which may mean the Auckland Plan doesn't exist, or it's a pumped up Auckland Plan, the regional spatial strategy to comply with the law, and the team are now working on how that, because it's only just passed, but next year we'll have to either look at refreshing the Auckland Plan or creating the new regional spatial strategy to align. So the issue is how those two, they're coinciding at the same time. So how we do this new thing. The awkward thing is, and what our presentation or submission was, is that the law changes but doesn't really consider Auckland as different or already ahead of the game. So that is our issue, is that where does staff continue the normal process, or how do we fit into the new process at the same time? So there may be a slight lag, am I right, Megan?
Yeah, look, just confirming both Denise and Councillor Hills, there are options available to us. The Auckland plan will not continue like it is forever. We will need to morph it into this regional spatial strategy. We need to understand what that means. So I think to answer your question, Councillor Filipina, I can't be absolutely certain that a full Auckland-wide consultation will happen in 2024. It will happen, but we need to understand what these options are about these two kind of documents now, and how the council wants to take them forward.
Thank you. Reserve my right to speak. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, from my view, the Spatial Planning Act is more outcome focused, environment focused, te ao Māori focused, but we were already doing a lot of those things, so how we build that remains to be seen, how that rolls out. But I guess we don't want to do two processes, one next year and then have to change to a whole new plan the year after. Be pretty tough on the teams, especially, and the city. But good point. Member Ashby, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the work in the background. Just a couple from me. Just thinking of the diagram there and the flow through, really my question's around how the plan and the measures in relation specifically to Māori outcomes, how does that inform the direction and funding of council towards addressing those metrics? So not just the Māori identity and wellbeing, but of course they're sprinkled throughout those different outcomes. So is that included in that diagram on the right of this presentation? I guess, could you just speak to how those Māori, specifically Māori outcomes are addressed, where their indicators are down or they haven't moved, but that's not necessarily a good thing? And the only other question was, are you or how are you communicating the findings back to iwi and Mātai Waka groups, just to keep them informed so that they can, they've got plans of their own as well. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yes, yes, the Auckland plan is quite different because it's required to provide the basis for alignment of council's other strategies and plans. So we tend to implement the Auckland plan through our council adopted strategies, and this would include the Māori outcomes framework. That's very much a key implementation strategy plan. Our measures are outcome measures, so you'll tend to find that a lot of the measures that help implement or progress towards the outcome are included in these supporting strategies. So our monitoring and reporting framework is very much aligned with the Māori outcomes framework, as well as monitoring frameworks for the other strategies that you'll hear an update on progress today. In terms of annual progress, there wasn't much movement in our Māori measures. We included a new one to support the Māori decision making around Māori turnout in local elections, but you'll see that hasn't really moved from the new baseline. It's about 25%. So yes, there's scope for improvement there.
The second part of the question. I was just going to ask the second part of the question. We can certainly send this report to iwi if that's useful.
Thanks, Member Ashby. And we do that. Often people do ask what the point of the Auckland plan and other plans are, but this does influence everything throughout the organisation, plus all our other plans. So it does, as our Māori outcomes work stream through the 10-year budget, we'll need to consider this and how we continue to build on those Māori outcomes across the whole of the organisation, including CCOs. Sorry, Councillor Bartley.
Kia ora, Chair, thank you. Thank you for this report. I see it as justification for the function of council that focuses on community wellbeing. But as you say, the political direction seems to be moving that this is the responsibility of others. So I'm just wanting to know, do you think it can be used as an accountability tool for the others, mainly like central government? And is there any buy-in from central government on our Auckland plan so that we can use it as a measurement against their outcomes?
That's something that we have struggled with. Certainly when we were developing when we were doing the refresh of the Auckland Plan in 2018, it wasn't ideal timing. It coincided with the election, so that there was a limit to what officials could say and get involved. However, saying that, when the plan was adopted, there was buy-in from central government. I think the Auckland Plan suffers a bit from, we often see a lack of momentum because it's a bit of a time from when the plan was adopted, and keeping that momentum going is quite challenging. So that's why we're thinking about options around the refresh of the Auckland Plan and possibly how that fits with the development of a new regional spatial strategy. I do know that there has been work around the development of regional priorities with central government, particularly in the social wellbeing space. But I must admit, Council isn't particularly involved in that process at the moment.
Thank you. Do you know, do you think it's something that we need to work on to ensure Council stays in that process?
Yes, very much so, because delivering on social wellbeing very much depends on that partnership approach with government and our social providers, of course.
Kia ora, Councillor. And government agencies and other organisations do use the Auckland Plan and feed into and try, we feed back the other way. So it's a living document throughout, and obviously we need to use it to put pressure on agencies who maybe are responsible or are more responsible, or we could partner with on these issues. Kia ora. Councillor Turner.
The Chair, maybe comment. I'm not sure how to frame my question. Okay, thank you. I didn't understand the 570 pages, and it's hard to get to grips with it all. I presume it's much like the Waitaki Ranges Heritage Area Monitoring Report, which I know intimately, so I can then go through the monitoring report and see where it has and hasn't hit the targets that I believe we're trying to measure. So I looked at this and I just ran through it sort of section by section and ended up just going to the trends at the bottom. So you have pages of writing and then 2 lines of trend, which is just a little red arrow down or a little green arrow up. And, how does this yearly mammoth amount of work, and it is a mammoth amount of work, I give you that, actually become a Swiss Army knife that we can use as a tool and whip out the different blades necessary to achieve the improvements we have to have?
Sorry about that. I think our report is about 100 pages or so, but we do have a summary, and when we post it up on our website, we have the full document plus a summary infographic, which makes it easier for the public to understand. Yes, we do use the Auckland Plan, particularly around advocating to central government. For example, we always share a copy with the Auckland Policy Office. They of course do their own monitoring, but you'll find there's very similar issues that are identified, and then this forms the basis of joint action or the identification of regional priorities. I must say, I don't think that work has fully developed into a list of actual regional priorities. I think there's opportunity for that to develop going forward.
But it has, you know, it even talks about baseline data there, but that too is all over the place, from like just 1 year to 5 years, and in many cases it doesn't actually establish a, so please, and I don't want to hold everyone up, but you know, one figure in my head, I know it's an Auckland Transport figure, but you know, only $4 million spent on footpaths, 100 years of requests ahead of us at that spending. I was looking in here to see those trends of where we're going forward to improve those sorts of figures. Am I out of step here with this, with what this thing's supposed to do?
So it is measuring outcomes at a high level, and there are only 33 measures in the report, so we don't measure everything. Every 3 years we take a deeper dive and look into a wider range of data, which is the report that we brought to you in March, which is to act more to inform the LTP. It is true that there's a range of data. Some of it is only available every few years, but we're reporting annually, so we don't always have that data to hand. And that's why we're considering all the time how we can improve our reporting processes and make them more effective, and whether an annual report is what's the most effective way to do that. So we'll continue to look at that over the next few months to think about what might be the most effective reporting tool, so that you have the information you need to identify those sorts of things.
So, Mr. Chair, my comment is we should be aiming at measuring at the level the public see, and then we can engage with the public with the issues and the levels. Thanks.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Got a few questions. First of all, in respect of housing, and especially housing affordability, is there any monitoring done on the number of affordable houses actually being built? The reason I'm asking that question is part of the Auckland plan is to try and ensure that, but my gut tells me, based on my understanding, is that we're actually going in the opposite direction. That is, the number of houses being built are more expensive, and it may well be that the actions of the government and the Auckland plan have made matters worse. So coming back to my question, do we have any figures on affordable homes? And I do understand that there is this percentage, housing costs as a percentage of household income, but that's not answering my question.
It's quite difficult to measure homes being built. So we have kind of two proxy measures in the reports. One is number of consents, and certainly the number of consents are still very high in the Auckland region. And the other measure we use is those developments receiving code of compliance. And that's probably a more accurate measure of number of houses being built. But again, it's still quite high from the most recent figures we've looked at.
Okay, so given that this information, a supplementary question, given that...
I'm just going to give you that the last figure, I think, was in the last 12 months was 19,200 consents with about 19,000 with about 15,000 code of compliance. So it's roughly 80% of consents are being built, but obviously it's hard to measure exact.
Sure.
But it doesn't, that's not affordable, well, that's just all.
Supplementary question. Given that this information is available, for example, there are records of house sales, those records include the value of those homes, Barfin and Thompson, various real estate agencies have that information, it is available. Why can't we access that information and report on it, and also show trend analysis? So if it's getting worse, we can show that. If it's not, can we do that?
I should have also said that the development strategy also produces an annual monitoring report, and they're very much focused on development, and they're required to consider market trends. So I think that issue would more appropriately be dealt with in their monitoring report, but it's certainly something we could raise with them.
Okay, I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about the number of monitoring reports that we've got. I could elucidate the numbers, but I would have thought that this was a logical place to have something as important as this. The other question I've got is there's been a decrease in cycling numbers, That's against the background where the expenditure on that is absolutely massive. Again, my gut tells me, based on observation, that there are very expensive cycleways that have little or no use. Do we have some trend analysis around that? And with respect to the various items of data, can we have some graphs and so on that project where things are going? And in particular, as it goes to the ongoing increase in greenhouse gas emissions in Auckland. So is it possible to have some simple graphical presentation so that somebody can pick it up? And it cuts to the question that Councillor Turner was raising.
Yes, we've included some graphs in the reports, particularly around cycling numbers, and we are seeing a downward trend. Unfortunately, we don't know why that's happening. We tend to look back at long-term trend data. We tend not to project forward into the future.
Okay, and my last question, Mr. Chair, and again, it follows on from Councillor Turner's question. I mean, monitoring is all very fine, but the purpose of monitoring is to lead to management and to lead to action and implementation so that you have got a management loop to sort things out, particularly if some of these issues like housing affordability, increasing greenhouse gas emissions are some of the most significant concerns that we face. So where do I find that information on what we need to do? Is that in this report or is that in some other report?
So as Karen talked about earlier, the Auckland plan provides the basis for alignment with the other strategies. So there are monitoring reports for some of those other areas. For example, the Te Taraki a Tāwhiri, which is another item on the agenda today, where those particular focus on specific issues are picked up.
Through the Chair, if I could just add as well, certainly in the advice that we come to you with around directions, around your opportunities for investment, your budget, where your money would go, and what kind of outcomes you want to achieve, we start with the Auckland plan. So ultimately it is the decisions that are made, by the governing body in particular, but also local boards, which would either continue to move, towards a particular outcome that we're wanting to achieve or not. And so that is what we start our advice with, and it is up to you about whether you continue, those kind of investments in certain areas or not, and that will either assist towards an outcome or not. We also know with the Auckland plan, it is Auckland's plan, it is not just Auckland Council's plan. So we also know that there are some outcomes and things which we have less control over than others, but where we do have control, I would hope that you would see our advice, that we would be very clear about what we're recommending that you would need to do, and then it's up to you about whether you do that and how quickly you move into those directions.
One last question, Mr. Chair, and it follows on from Megan's comment. Quite obviously we're reporting on the Auckland plan, but there are also things that the government has foisted on us, Plan Change 78 and the like. Again, my gut is that has significantly increased the cost of land. It's increasing unaffordability. Where do we report on that? And earlier, for example, there was another piece of government legislation. Another councillor might help me as to what it was. It was around also releasing areas of land that led to massive rounds of speculation and an increase in value and affordability. So where do we pick up on those things? And the reason I ask that is we receive no reporting whatever from government on the success of any of these schemes that the government puts in place, and I'm not just referring to Labour, National, they all come up with something, and if it's an abject failure, nobody wants to know about it. I would suggest we have a responsibility. So how are we monitoring that, given that it interacts directly and arguably overrides our Auckland plan? Thank you.
Kia ora through the chair. I might, if you're okay, talk to the chair and deputy chair of the committee about that and about how we can better provide advice. Just one broad comment, of course, some of this takes time, and you've heard Karen and Denise talk about trends. We may not know what the impact of Plan Change 78 is, for example, for a few years. We might know tomorrow. So we just know that some of these timeframes are harder to report on immediately than others. But if I can take that away and talk to the chair and deputy chair.
Again, just a supplementary comment. I would just refer the head of strategy to the real estate data, which is accurate, timely, free. We should be picking up on that because it's very revealing.
Thanks. We do use that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. And just comment on the cycling data. Just make sure you caveat the data with we were going up 6 or 7% every single year. COVID hit. The drops are significant in 2020, and then further more dramatic in 2021 because of the 4-month Auckland lockdown, and a lot of our cycle count is coming into the city centre, and we saw a massive drop-off, obviously, and that is coming back now. But from, I think, 2014, we were seeing about 800,000 trips a year, and we got up to 3.8 million. So significant from the investment, but also acknowledge our investment in cycling is about 1% of the transport budget that is not even being rolled out. So just wanted to caveat that. Councillor Watson.
I'll wait and make a brief comment, I think. Thank you.
Cool. Any more questions? Kia ora, thank you. Well, I'll move, and Deputy Chair Councillor Dalton will second. There are brief comments from Councillor Filipaina, and then we'll go to Councillor Watson and Walker. Thank you both. Thank you both. Sorry.
Yeah. Just want to acknowledge the staff as they're walking away, because I know that this particular plan and being part of it from 2012 has been a hell of a lot of work. So I just want to acknowledge our staff going back to 2010, discussing it 2012, the first, 2018, the revised version. So I just want to acknowledge you in regards to that. Chair, I think we need to have a look at what happens, whether it be revisiting. I noticed that when we passed 2012, there was an indication that we will review the Auckland plan 6 years' time, and we did. And interesting on the website, the Auckland Council website, around the Auckland Plan 2012 and why we revised it. And the comment there is, our fast-changing world meant that the 2012 plan no longer provided the necessary direction for decision-making. I believe we'll reach that stage as well. The whole world's changing. So it'll be good to get some information back around how we end up. No duplication. I heard what, excuse me, I must have been the run this morning that I went. It was a 5K run. So look, sorry about that. But I understand what Megan and yourself, Chair, have said around the plan and no duplication, so totally agree. I want to acknowledge at this stage Katie Bexley, because I raised it at the workshop around where the four well-beings are placed. In the presentation, I see them well placed. They were on the second slide with the PowerPoint, and they are placed because it's local government and the four well-beings. So, Chair, I'm hoping that there is going to be an opportunity for us, because I know, talking to a lot of the organisations that are part of the Safety Collective Tamaki Makaurau, which I chair, I know that a lot of the organisations there are looking forward to have another input, because since 2018 and today and even next year, things have changed, and changed quite a bit. And again, the results with our annual plan that we've just put through, the Auckland plan again played a part, and it is the whole of Auckland in regards to this. Chair, the reason I ended up wanting to acknowledge Katie is because she gave me the section, she gave me an email around section 80 bracket 3 of the Local Government Act 2009, and there is no legislation doesn't say that we have to review every 6 years. I'm hoping that at some stage, once we get what the government is doing, that we will revisit and we will consult with the whole of Auckland with the Auckland plan. So we'll definitely support the receiving of the plan, but I think there just needs to be work done and look forward to that piece of work in the next 2 years. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the points that they might otherwise have asked in questions. That goes to the relevance of what's reported in this monitoring report and the council response, and I assume that response includes CCOs too. I'm assuming there's communication there. And the section that really stood out for me was the reporting on the Auckland's mental health and the proportion, in particular this survey that was done, Quality of Life I think, where the proportion of respondents who rated their mental health positively has declined from 72% to 65% in 2022. It might even be lower than that now, which roughly means there's a third of Auckland population who do not rate their mental health as good. And if you go and look at some of the other components, such as Pacific people, for instance, they were at 50%, which is pretty distressing, really. But as far as the council response goes and that awareness, I just sort of think of my own experience today, where I woke up and it was a beautiful sunny day. I thought I'll get the ferry in today. I'll cycle there, reduce my VKTs, get a bit of fresh air. It's a downhill run from where I live, right along Gulf Harbour, peering expectantly over to the sea. Lovely mill pond, absolutely flat as a bowling green. And just looking for that ferry coming up in the distance. That was in vain. Got to the marina, and instead of the beautiful ferry, there was 2 crowded minibuses. I was fortunate to get one of the last seats. A number of people were left there stranded. I don't know what happened to them or their mental health after that. Being recognised as a councillor, I then was subjected to about an hour and 10, 20 minutes, trapped in the minibus with some very agitated people who have been going through this for 2.5 years. And I just thought, these people are under stress. They're under mental stress. As much as I joke about it, it comes from consequences that really impact upon their life, a number of whom have chosen to live in this suburb because there's a ferry service. And I think of the responses from the various parts of council, but in particular the one that's meant to take authority for that. And I think that's really agitating people. Usually the most relaxed, laid-back people on public transport are ferry patrons. They get off, they've had a nice commute down, and they do their work. It's a beautiful environment. They get off, unlike bus stations, unlike train stations where people are rushing. So in terms of the reporting here, Mr. Chair, I would suspect that in my suburb that I represent, that I'm trying to save their ferry service, they'll be probably the lowest ranked quotient of anyone, and that'll be saying something.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Mr. Chair, I went through a learning curve when I voted against the monitoring report for the Waitaki Ranges Heritage Area. I'm going to vote against this for the same reason, and that is because I understand it's an informational report, but it doesn't contain all the information. we're missing a bunch of stuff here which allows us to make rational, constructive input into what the spirit of this thing is. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, sorry, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Unlike Councillor Watson, I deliberately didn't take the Gulf Harbour ferry because I know that Auckland Transport receives vehicle movement sheets the day before that tells them whether it's even going to be running or not. But of course, the poor people that use the ferry aren't given that information, even though it's available well in advance. So I didn't bother, and frankly, I made the right choice. But I would suggest that if we take the sort of experience of Councillor Watson and we multiply it across the region and produce a snapshot of the life of many individuals, and I can remember we've had social reports from various agencies that have done that, we might actually achieve something that's very revealing. But my real concern across a whole range of metrics is we're not getting more affordable housing, our emissions are going up, congestion is going up, a whole lot of things are going up. And these are all trends against a background where other cities have got those trends going down. So as much and all as we can achieve this report, it is vital that we have benchmarking against other cities. I continue to ask for this. We do not get it. So we in Auckland are an outlier. We're one of the worst performing cities on the planet. And this is catastrophic. So we should be looking at the reasons behind this, the structural reasons, because as somebody said at the TERP meeting yesterday, if we keep doing what we've always been doing, and that's what we're doing, we're actually going to be in an even worse fix. If we add immigration figures to that from a number of people, there are people leaving that I know. Obviously, there are people coming for various reasons. It is not a good look as a city. So I would expect that we have some rapid and fast reporting on our state. Otherwise, what use is monitoring if it doesn't lead to management and action? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to the somewhat invidious situation our staff are in with this report. And Councillor Philippaina's points about, you know, we do this exercise every 6 years. The last 6 years have been some of the most stressful for us as individuals in Auckland, but also for this organisation. We've been through an enormous amount of change at the central government level as well. You know, these have been incredibly challenging times, and it must have been very difficult to produce an annual monitoring report on a situation of such magnitude of change since the plan was last done in 2018. So I absolutely do not envy them that. I guess I'd point some of my colleagues to the fact that, as the Chair has pointed out, we will be doing this process or a similar process again probably next year that will catch a lot of those changes. But also, you know, I don't think it's fair to say that we are the worst performing city. I'm not quite sure what metric, one of, sorry, is that, anyway. I'm not sure what metric that refers to. I see the Wall Street Journal out today saying New Zealand's the easiest place to do business yet again. Auckland would be a big part of that, I imagine. That's international. I look at, you know, we do have a problem in the housing space, and that is intrinsically linked with our transport issues. And many of us at this table have been pushing for improvements in both of those areas. And I guess I would point my colleagues to the forthcoming work on the future development strategy as well, which will really help us, if we head in a good direction on that, will really help us to address some of those housing and transport issues by concentrating on a compact city model that we know will both reduce emissions and provide more affordable housing for people in places where they can access the services they need. So I think we are largely just receiving a monitoring report on this, but I did just want to make those points as we vote for this. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll be really quick because I just want to make sure that we're keeping positive about the fantastic city that we live in. Look, I think this is one of the best cities in the world. And the monitoring reports that we receive actually paint a picture of that every time. I think that when we're messaging to the public, we need to always be reminding people how lucky we are in Auckland. You know, of course there's challenges. You know, and I mean, we've had COVID, we've had huge inflation, which is still a monster yet to be tackled, although we're getting there. We've had storms, which have caused huge impact in my ward and others. We've got all manner of problems as a city, and yet despite that, we're still standing strong, aren't we? We're still providing things in these reports that we can really celebrate. I just wanted to point out the one of my particular favourite point here. Point 20, I'm going to read it out because I think it's very important to note. The number of new dwellings consented in Auckland continues to reach record highs. We've had a housing crisis, and that is well signposted. We've had years of housing problems, but every time we get reports about housing through this committee and others, the problem is getting smaller. Auckland is on the grow. We're providing housing for people, and council has a huge part to play in that in terms of its planning and its consenting and all the rest of it. We should be celebrating this. We're actually winning, right? So let's not lose sight of that, and let's actually celebrate all the good things about Auckland. Thanks, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor. Deputy Chair Dalton.
Well, I'm glad that I'm following happy Councillor Henderson today, who I believe is in congestion on shared paths. So that will show the popularity of our shared pathways. But just in that same vein, we can only move forward and reach these targets if we're going to make the right decisions. So when we're having our discussions around our plans, our climate action plan, around TERP, everything else, it's us that can continue to drive us forward in the right direction for the success of the city. This monitoring report, I feel, is better than the last one that we had. Well, that's the sense I got of it when I read it. I remember speaking to the last one and feeling a bit of despair. So I'll be voting to receive this report. I think you're right, Councillor Henderson, we're going gangbusters, and considering what we've had, the challenges that we've had both financially, socially, environmentally, economically over the past few years. So more power to us and Tamaki Makaurau to keep moving forward, but give us the strength to make the right decisions, stop saying no to stuff. You know, there's some decisions that are made just as, that are barriers to progress, and that's where we get disheartened and we don't. We try and stop housing, we try and stop cycleways. That stuff is going to mean we don't achieve the outcomes of the Auckland plan. So kia ora, thank you, Chair. I'll be voting for this.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, look, I want to just acknowledge the officers. It's a very hard sort of report to prepare because you're preparing a report based on how people perceive the community around them and how they perceive the experiences around them. And, you know, it's not great at the moment, so it's hard to write a report on that basis because, gee whiz, you're reporting on a perception which you're in part responsible for, but not responsible for all of it. So I think every point's interesting, Chair. Chair, you're right. The council does have to give effect to change. That's why we pass the budget. And that's why we adopt the statement of intent with Auckland Transport, so we can actually move forward and negotiate the outcomes as per that budget to deliver progress, negotiate progress with whatever government, and if we don't do those things, nothing happens. I do think, Chair, that with respect to the Auckland plan, it is difficult to really consider whether the measurements are that relevant when you are talking at such a macro scale for such a broad footprint such as Auckland. I take on board what Ken has said, but it is a monitoring report. I'm not quite sure what will be achieved if we're voting not to receive that.
but I do think that there are measures in the Auckland plan which are probably not fit for purpose, and they'll need to be rethought as part of that next refresh. Thanks.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Any last requests?
I've taken on board what Councillor Newman says too, and I want to be in the debate going forward, so I'll be saying yes.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Just brief comment from me, and absolutely, I'll start with thanking the staff. I know there's a huge amount of work that goes into this. What we report on is what we've approved. So once again, I come back to making sure the opportunities we have to ask for more actions, more outcomes, more reporting, that's up to us. Staff report back on what we approve and what the feedback happened in the March committee. So just ensuring that those things are up to us. On Councillor Filipaina's point, yes, the recent passing through the third reading of the Spatial Planning Act and others will require all councils now to have a spatial plan. We have one, but the nuance is it is a slightly different way of doing things. So the issue for staff is trying to figure out in the next few months if we're able to do our 6-yearly refresh of the Auckland plan, or we have to create a whole new plan. That's still a bit uncertain, but there are some really good outcome-focused possibilities through that new law. But you know, we obviously want to strengthen what we're already doing, but the awkwardness is just has been the lack of certainty for us and staff over would that bill pass, how does it fit in, and of course the 10-year kind of nature of how that change is going to happen with those two bills together. On benchmarking, that has come through to us, Tātaki, Auckland Unlimited, we do get benchmarking against other cities. You know, in the last study, I think this year, we were 5th in the world for well-being against similar cities. Do we have problems? Yes, the Auckland plan will show that significantly. We rank lower, very low in housing affordability and quite low on access to public transport, walking and cycling. These figures will also show our emissions are not going in the right direction, but we also don't get that clear data for 3 years. So there's an issue with getting that up-to-date data to show whether we're making a difference in that space. Why I mentioned the cycling data, that was clear the drop-off is to do with COVID, and hopefully that will come back, but it will require investment to ensure that we get those cycle numbers back. And we are seeing a difference in where people work. A lot of that data and those counters are all facing the city centre because we've always been thinking about people coming in, and we've seen that kind of relationship change. So is it about ensuring we have cycle counters in other areas? The other issue is we've seen deaths and serious injuries amongst cyclists and pedestrians rise. So that may also be an issue that we have to address if we want to encourage that those moves to go on. But what we have seen is we've used the Auckland plan to invest in areas such as public transport, walking and cycling, and in those areas, such as the extension to the busway, what's going to happen with the city rail link, the northwestern cycleway that Councillor Henderson, gets knocked over on his scooter because it's so busy. Where we have invested, and Tamaki Drive and others, Councillor Deputy Mayor will show, where we have invested, people gravitate to it. So it's about how we ensure that is spread across the rest of Auckland, like through our urban ngāhere and different focuses where we show where we are succeeding across the city, but where we have to tip that balance, like in South Auckland with our tree canopy at 6%, where somewhere in my neighbourhood it's 30%. So how do we ensure that kind of investment and those metrics are being seen across Auckland? But once again, these data points are going to be difficult for us to understand for the last 4 years. We've had COVID, we've had horrendous floods, we've had droughts, we've had everything else happen to our city, cost of living crisis, that will skew a lot of the data. We need to use that data to make better decisions going forward, but we also need to understand how they are something that no one in a generation has seen. So, take the good, but we also need to focus on those significant pieces of data. But it's up to us. It's up to us to invest. It's up to us to make the decisions. We can't always point the finger. If we're going to say we're going to do something, we need to continue to figure out how we can fund it, how we can work with our community to do it, and stop complaining about it. So, all those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? Yes. Cool. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any abstentions? No, thank you. Right, we move on to item 9, the annual update on Te Tarakia Tawhiri, Auckland's climate plan.